Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. The purpose of the show is to build a world with better bosses, and we do that by learning from the greatest minds in leadership today. Whether you're new to leadership or a seasoned pro, you'll get practical insights to help you lead with confidence. Today's episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, Cadre of Men, and Pharaoh Skincare. Check out the show notes for links to our sponsors and all of my books. Today, we're talking about succeeding in a dysfunctional workplace. Now, have you ever had a boss who was toxic, maybe a micromanager, someone who drove you crazy with impossible demands? Well, my guest today, Eric Charran, has written a book to help us navigate this situation. Now, today, we're digging into the origin story of this book. We're exploring the 9 archetypes of challenging managers, and we're uncovering practical strategies to not only cope, but excel when the odds are stacked against you. Now, I wish I knew some of these strategies when I was in my corporate job. I know you'll love this powerful conversation as much as I did. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Eric Charran. Eric is a visionary technology executive, author, and thought leader with over 25 years of experience in transforming global enterprises through digital innovations, data-driven strategies, and AI-driven solutions. Known for his ability to bridge the gap between business objectives and complex technology, Eric has spearheaded transformative initiatives at major organizations, including Microsoft and Capital One, where he served as chief architect. He is the author of a brand new book called Have You Ever Had a Boss That Succeeding in a Dysfunctional Workplace? Now, in this book, Eric provides actionable strategies to help you not only cope, but excel in even the most dysfunctional environments. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more about how to succeed in a dysfunctional workplace. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
God, I'm super thrilled to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it is good to meet you. Good to have you on the show. And so many people I run into talk to me about bad bosses and dysfunctional workplaces. And you have now written the book on it. So I'm excited to have you on the show and learn, what you talk about in this book and how people can actually, not just survive, but thrive in these environments. So I think this is a really important episode. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
So let's start a little bit about the origin story for this book. Why did you feel like it was time to write this book? And it's have you ever had a boss that and I'm sure that is followed by all these different things that bad bosses do, right?
Yeah, it was a an interesting way in which it came about, and so I think one of the seminal moments of that stick out in my memory was when a bunch of folks that we all had the same manager. And we used to have these, what I call them is the vice president's therapy session. We would all get together and we would have, one-on-ones or one-on-manys, and we would all kind of sit around asking ourselves, hey, you know what our manager did the other day? They said this or they did this. And you can guess what happened next. I can guess what happened next. I've actually seen that behavior before. And let me guess, this is what happened or this is what they said. And they're like, yes, how did you know that? I said, I've seen this before. I've had maybe 2 or 3 managers that exhibited this exact behavior. And by the way, here's what I would recommend for you on how to deal with that. And it became this interchange of stories. And we all realized that we knew the types of behaviors before they actually occurred, and so it became relatively easy for us to say, hey, someone should write this down. And so I kind of volunteered. I said, you know what? I am actually going to spend some time writing this down. And that's really how we started coming up with descriptions of what I call unhelpful behaviors
Hmm.
around that reoccur within leaders throughout our careers. And what we began to realize, what I began to realize looking back on my 20 or 25 years that I've been around, is that I developed some coping strategies on how to deal with these things. It began with just identifying them and being like, okay, I'm not shocked. I am not burning with injustice. I am not surprised any longer. I have now seen this. How did I solve it last time? Will it work this time? And in many instances, as I began to kind of roll these elements of coping strategies forward, they began to work. Some instances, they don't work. And that's when you have to make a tough choice.
Interesting. So, before we press record, one of the things I said, we were talking about was the idea that, everyone that's listening to this podcast who's a leader, or even a potential or going to be a leader someday or is a leader, we're all followers as well. So, not
Hmm.
only are we trying to do the best for our team, we typically have bosses as well. So we might be the best leader in the world, but we might be working for one of these nine archetypes that you list in the book. And so I think one of the things that I think is powerful about the book is like, how do I be the best leader I can be when I'm working for one of these type of bosses, right?
That's exactly right, John. And what's really interesting is as I was writing all these things down, I began to kind of ask myself, do I do this?
Mm,
Is this me? Is maybe the reason why I know so much about this is not that I've been subject to it, but maybe I actually do this. And so there was a fair amount of worrisome introspection on my part as I was writing it. But I think that that's really ultimately that's what leaders really need is how am I being perceived? And I think my son was a fantastic student athlete. I was never any of those things, but he was both. And I used to watch him at practice, and I watched how his coaches coached him. And then I realized that the reason why the entire team has to take a lap when somebody goofs up, or the reason why you push somebody to run till you throw up, is because that's how they were coached. And
mm,
that's how they were coached. And so I kind of developed this thing in my brain like, hey, coaches coach how they were coached. Leaders lead how they were led. And in many instances, what got them there is what they think these behaviors will get them to the next level.
yeah,
And so these people are on their own journey, and they're not inherently bad or malicious. They're just exhibiting and betting on unhelpful behaviors because that's all that they know. And so we have a real opportunity to not stay silent, to not just suffer in silence, but to try to help grow them and at the same time help grow yourself and really form more of a partnership than a hey, I'm an order taker. I'm just gonna do exactly what you say and deal with the fallout.
yeah. Well, that's just that. I think it's great because I think you're right. Because I think too many leaders I see, they get it, they get the job and they really haven't a lot of training, so they become a caricature of what they think a leader should be versus what a leader really is. And
Mhm.
so I love that, and it's based on what their history is and based on their experience and based on what they think a leader should be. So well, let's get into these. So you're in the book, you identify nine of these archetypes. Which is one that you think that the leaders, the readers will really relate to?
Yeah, it's tough because I've encountered them all over the span of my career. I think the one that is probably the most surprising that many people might have dealt with is what I call the raw nerve manager. And
Hmm.
it's pretty self-explanatory. You might be able to kind of understand it's people that have a high degree of just reacting to things, situations, stress, and they kind of just vent or explode or whatever the outcome is. The stimulus and the reaction are not far apart. And so the other nuance to this, and the more ways that I've experienced the raw nerve manager, is in addition to that volatility aside, the raw nerve manager really has achieved their career progression by making quick decisions. They are decisive under pressure. When a decision needs to be made, when there's a fork in the road and time is as against you, which way do you go? Well, you need a quick decision. Maybe it's part instinct, maybe it's part knowing people, maybe it's part data, but it happens fast. And that's how they've achieved their career velocity. The challenge is the world has changed significantly. The way organizations of significant size make decisions is usually based on data. There was when I worked at Microsoft, we had a term when we were trying to change that culture. It used to be spot the hippo and then make sure that they are contained. Hippo stands for highest paid person's opinion. Many of your listeners might already know that. It was new to me at the time. And it usually is the person that comes in and sits at the head of the table. And the person who's typically the least senior has the most data. They have the opinions formed on data, and the hippo is the farthest from that data, but they've made snap choices and snap decisions. So there's one story I tell in the book around how there was this project that an individual was working on, and it was a research project to choose a cloud provider for as a technology partner for extreme ROI. We're talking millions, if not billions of dollars, aligning around this technology partner. And there had been a team apportioned. They spent weeks making these evaluations, doing proof of concepts, figuring out the pros and cons, creating these decision matrices. And they had maybe about a week's worth of work left before they were ready to kind of make the official recommendation. And in a senior leadership meeting, the manager says, "You know what? I was reading on Reddit last night about this cloud provider, and there's a bunch of bad reviews about this product that they just launched. I'm not feeling that this is the right choice for us. I'm getting really bad vibes, so I think we should go in this other direction." And in the meeting, the individual was like looking at me like, I can't believe this is happening. Like did they just quote a bunch of Reddit posts based on all of the scientific hypothesis and the data that we have around this vendor recommendation? And this individual was just like, "No, we're going this way because I read some posts on Reddit." And in that moment, the question is, what do you do? Some people stay silent. Some people can think on their feet. Some people say the wrong things in that session. Some people also are raw nerve and they might erupt.
Yeah.
And so the question is, there's a fair amount of injustice that's almost like your seat's on fire. You start sweating. You start getting the tingles in your fingers, and you're like, I can't believe this is happening. And then the question that I try to answer in the book is like, what do you do after that?
Mm.
What do you do? How do you not be surprised? How do you react, or how do you respond instead of react? So the raw nerve is one that's kind of stands out because it was the most stunning to me when I encountered it for the first time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've certainly seen that. I've seen that sort of those bosses that are like that, and it's the gut reaction and the gut instincts, and and I think I probably have fallen into that sometimes. Especially I've been in the same industry for 30 years, so I sort of have, I'm sort of pre-wired to things like, oh, we tried that 25 years ago, and that's terrible to have that. So a lot of times
Right.
I try to, as an older leader, is try not to be, to prejudge ideas based on my experience. I sort of let my younger team sort of explore ideas. And so I have to control myself. It's like, because when you've been doing something for a long time, you sort of like, oh yeah, that won't work. You can quickly, but
You know,
yeah, but I think that oftentimes young people have some really creative, different approaches. And so I have to say, hold that thought, let me hear you out, and respond instead of react. I think that's probably really good advice, right?
I resonate with your testimony there greatly. Early on in career, I tell my team, I say being right is only 50% of the battle. The
Mm,
other 50% is getting senior decision makers and C-suite people to
yes.
be in the mindset to listen to you and to maybe change their perspectives. If they're not willing to listen, no matter how much data is on your side, no matter no matter whether or not you've walked off this cliff before and broken both legs and they're about to do the same thing, they're not going to listen if they're not willing to listen. And I always tell them too that people tend to, in my experience, tend to make emotional choices and seek reason, logic, and data to back it up. But they bind to the choice. And
Yeah.
unless you approach it from an emotionally intelligent perspective and you identify with them and lull them into a position that this person really understands me, now I will hear what they have to say. You're not going to succeed. And I literally, John, I had a great manager at the time. He said, "Eric, you're probably one of the smartest people I know." And this was back during when at Microsoft, they hired you for what you knew, not if you knew how to learn. And so he's like, "Sit on your hands." And it worked. I literally, physically, John, actually sat on my hands in a meeting as to not blurt out the answers or not blurt out what's going to happen or not blurt out what's going to come. And it worked. It
Mm,
really helped me retool and think about, well, if this person, if I blurt out the answer, they're going to be like, well, they didn't really think about my problem at all. They didn't really put any thought into it. And as a result, I don't trust what they're going to say. And that's really the perspective that I had to try to adapt to.
yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So another type of leader you call the emergency broadcaster. I love this. What is this archetype like, and how should people deal with it when they have this kind of a boss?
Yeah, it's one that's oh, gosh, you talk about all these, they're equally visceral because I their recency is incredible. But the best story I can tell you, and by the way, all these stories that are in the book are ones that actually happened to me. or a direct report of mine, or somebody that was, I was peers with. So these are real stories. So the best one I can think of is, as a VP, your day is packed with meetings and upon meetings on meetings, which is a whole nother topic altogether. But typically, you don't have a lot of breaks or spare times in your day. Now, your manager typically knows this. And so what they tend to do is they look at the very beginnings of the day, and they look at the very late nights, and they're like, okay, I know they're not busy during these times. If I can squeeze in a emergency request or this last minute presentation that I didn't prepare for, but now is an emergency because it's due tomorrow, let me just throw a 7:30 meeting on everybody's calendar, because I know the VPs will be available then, because they don't their meetings start at, typically 8 or 9 in the morning. So you have these emergency broadcasts that are going out, CFO presentation tomorrow, CEO product council happening tomorrow. Who's got the slides? Who's going to prepare? Who knows what's going to be in the room? And when these Slack messages start coming out, or Teams messages or whatever, and they're not getting the feel that we're prepared, the 7:30 meeting pops up right in the middle of you dropping your kids off, you struggling with coffee at Starbucks, you in the back of an Uber or on a train. You're now joining from all these different locations. You're trying to quiet your kids down in the back seat as they're screaming, and you're just trying to figure out, how many action items am I going to get out of this thing? And that's what the emergency broadcaster was all about. And a lack of preparedness on that manager's part now becomes an emergency for all their direct reports. And they intrude on your family time, your commute time, your relaxation time, your decompression time, because they know that it's likely that you're not going to have a calendar invite during those times.
Wow. So what do we do? How do we handle that kind of a boss?
You know what's interesting about this, in terms of the coping strategy? The number one thing I tell people is to set boundaries,
Mm.
because it takes two people to participate in an emergency like that, especially when it's lack of preparedness. There's always going to be emergencies. You're always going to have to get up in a different time zone and talk to different people around the world. There are going to be emergency meetings where there's unreasonable demands. That's just part of doing business. It's when it occurs frequently, and then it occurs based on a lack of preparedness. That's when you got the opportunity. So in that scenario, you have to basically set boundaries. The first thing is to say, I am not going to respond to your emergencies. I am not available at 7:30 in the morning because I am dropping my children off at school. And you might say, gosh, that I could never do that, because I would miss out on everybody else that came to that meeting and participated in it, and I would miss out on the heroics involved in making sure that everyone was prepared. I can't miss out on that. And that is a very understandable feeling from an early in career or mid in career person who's trying to look after your own career velocity. You want to be a team player, you want to participate in emergencies. But ultimately, after the fourth, fifth, or sixth one, it just becomes a negative spiral for you. And setting boundaries and saying, listen, I understand this is an emergency. I am here to participate. Let me know what happens during the 7:30 meeting. I'm going to be unavailable, and I will follow up with you as I get into the office. I'll make time during my workday. I'll communicate on my lunch, but these are my boundaries, and I have to wrestle with my FOMO, or my fear of missing out, and I'll have to promise to catch up. I'll get the AI transcript of the meeting. You can assign me action items. I'll pick them up, and I'll communicate with you. I'll communicate with my peers. So as much as you have to set boundaries, and as hard as that is, the coping strategy around dealing with your own FOMO is equally as challenging. If you can do those two things, you can teach the manager how to manage you instead of being subject to their whims and their lack of preparedness. And then eventually I talk about how you can help your manager and coach your manager to become more prepared to prevent against the emergencies. And that's really part of the coping strategy as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of it is we have to learn how to manage upwards better. And I think we have to be setting boundaries is really important. And again, I'm saying this as, for the last 9 years, I've been running my own business where I have a very deep relationship with my employees, right?
Hmm.
But I think back to my corporate days where, yeah, you're right. You're trying to make a career, you're trying to grow, you're trying to get opportunities, but you've got to have you got to have boundaries, and I think that it's important that you establish those boundaries, even with the boss, even with the desire to move up. And I think what you said is true, is that our own personal feelings of fear of missing out is probably really strong, and so we have to put that at bay, because I mean we can't, we're we're one screw up away from being fired anyway. So why should we lose our family in the middle of this as well? So
It's real, John. You're 100% right. Like, how many times, I mean, maybe in your career, how many times have you been on vacation and you're going away for 2 weeks with your family? Everybody else, the world doesn't stop, and you go, I'll still have my phone with me. Text me for emergencies. That is you not wanting to miss out on a career advancing opportunity. That is
yes,
you not wanting to be behind the eight ball, because when you come back, you not only do you have to catch up, but you might have missed out on opportunities to prove yourself, to get in line for a promotion, and it's what Americans tend to do to themselves. I don't think the
yeah.
rest of the world, the Europeans certainly don't have this problem.
No, they
I hate
don't.
to paint with broad brushstrokes, but I
No,
don't think that they do.
it's so true. And I've worked for, two big European companies. And so, yeah. And so they think we're crazy, and we are crazy in America for sure. Absolutely.
Right.
Uh, so like, as readers are going through this book, and they're seeing these different archetypes, how can they use the stories in this book, the archetypes in this book, the coping strategies in the book, to improve their own leadership style?
It's a great call out. I think as you're reading it, I think yeah, leaders have two ways to kind of consume the guidance. The first is, like you mentioned at the top of the chat, they also have leaders and they need to manage upwards that probably have unhealthy behaviors or unhelpful behaviors, and they need to proactively empathize, to understand the motivations, to get their managers into a mindset where they're willing to listen to prevention, to live willing to listen to changing their own behaviors. But at the same time, there should be this tingling, like, do I do this?
Mm.
Maybe I'm actually I probably scheduled a few 7:30 meetings in my time because I know that nobody's busy. Did I give a second thought to people that might have children, that might be dropping them off at school, that might be commuting, that whose mornings I just disrupted from a routine perspective? And having that level of awareness, I think, is key. And the hope is, as you're reading this, you're looking at both sides. How can I manage upward and treat my manager as a partner? At the same time, how can I look at my team and say, I need to change my own behaviors? And my hope is that it'll make the team a better team, a stronger team.
I like that a lot. I think that's a great way to put it. Like, look through these, read through these archetypes, and say, okay, am I doing something in that, in that category, or that list that is, do I fit this? Am I a raw nerve kind of leader?
Right,
Sometimes.
right,
Okay, yeah, all right. I recognize that maybe, at the end of the day, when someone brings me a problem on a Friday afternoon, I might be that raw nerve leader, right? So
right,
I need to
exactly.
sort that out, right? So I love that.
Yep.
One of the things you say, and I think it's interesting, is it's 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 important that we have specific archetypes, to call bosses, versus saying a good boss or a bad boss. So, I say in this podcast we want to build a world with better bosses, but you're saying very specifically it's not so much good and bad. It's certain archetypes, certain, types of leaders. Why is it important to not just say good or bad?
Yeah, it's a great point because that's really what I tried to do by defining archetypes around the
Mm.
behaviors and not castigating or vilifying or pigeonholing people as a bad manager or a good manager. And you might be like, hey, Eric, aren't you just splitting hairs? But in reality, part of what the advice is in this book is to empathize and understand motivations. And I think the reason why we call people bad is because we assume that they are behaving in ways in which they are fully aware of what they're doing, and they're doing it in spite of being aware. And maybe there are bad bosses. I'm sure that there are bad people that are acting in bad ways and having bad effects on people intentionally. But in large part, in my experience, in my 25 years that I've been around, these people are exhibiting unhelpful behaviors not because they want to be unhelpful. They believe that they're doing the best they can, and with the tools that they have. And largely, the tools that they have were inherited from other people that they thought they knew what they were doing, and now they're like, "Well, that person did that, and that's how I was managed. That's how I'm going to do it." And this is just what leaders do. In many instances, lots of leaders kind of really don't know how to manage.
Mm.
They know what the expectations are, they know what their accountabilities are, but they're not necessarily sure how to, navigate a skill and will conversation. They're not necessarily sure how to look after and create elements of psychological safety. They're not really good at morale and understanding the emotional contexts of a team and where they are on their journey. And as a result, they just kind of resort to what was done for them, and the cycle perpetuates. And the real key, in my estimation, is you need to understand, you need to empathize that these people are not villains. They're doing the best they can. If they knew the true impact of some of these unhelpful behaviors, I imagine that they would say, oh, goodness, I have to stop that right away.
Mm,
In many instances, they may not even be aware of it. They might not want to act this way, but they don't have anything else to fall back on. And so my hope is, as you read some of these coping strategies, it's not just how you survive the dysfunction or the unhelpful behavior and cope with it. It's how you actually grow, how you grow yourself, and how you, through your own growth, how you can grow your manager in a respectful way, how you can manage upwards and respect their position. I think many people, especially earlier in career people, they look at a manager and they're like, this person has my entire economic and career outlook in their hands. They
mm,
control whether or not I'm employed. They control what bonuses I get. And as a result, I need to salute and take orders. And in reality, these are just people that are learning. They're just maybe a few years ahead of you in their learning journey or their career journey. And they can use as much helpful advice as you can give them as possible. And so the kind of rebalancing of this priority in your mind is I am a partner to this person. I certainly can learn from them, but that doesn't mean that I can't help them grow.
mm. Interesting. I had a boss one time that I was head of operations, and we had a boss come in who was kind of marketing sales background. He became the general manager, just had no operational experience. And I sort of at one point I thought, this is going to be terrible because this guy doesn't know anything about manufacturing, anything operations. We had two large manufacturing plants. And so, but one of the things I purposely did was I said, okay, I'm going to always sit on his right hand side. I'm going to be his partner. I'm going to be his right hand man. And I purposely physically put myself on his right hand side every time we were
Wow.
together. So it was a reminder that, okay, he doesn't really know operations, but I do, and I'm going to be his right
Mhm.
hand man. And I love that was sort of my coping strategy with dealing with like an inexperienced boss in a
Mhm.
role that was probably over his head. And so I said, I'm going to make him super successful, and that was my mindset, even though I felt like I probably was better qualified for that job, but it's okay, like I'm going to be that person's right hand man, and I physically would put myself on the right hand of that person. And I think it was my way of reminding myself of my role.
To me, that's also really insightful what you did because you're practicing like servant leadership. You're
Mm,
basically saying, I'm going to be a resource to prop this individual up while they get ramped up, and together we're going to succeed. Rather than this person coming in has no idea what they're doing. I do. I should be in that role.
yeah.
And approaching it from a negative aspect. There's nothing worse, by the way. We used to call it reorg season at Microsoft, where your entire manager, their manager, and manager's manager, you would just move organizations. And it became really disheartening after two or three moves because you spend the entire year, maybe years, building up what I call career credit with these people.
Yeah.
You're saying, hey, I think I'm operating at the next level. I'm due for these promotions. I'm on your radar from being a high performer. You know me from a career perspective, and you can count on me. And all of a sudden, they're gone, and a new stack comes in. You're like, I'm starting from zero.
Mm,
So that behavior that you espoused is a fantastic strategy to say change is going to happen. Career credit can move or go. When when a change does happen, I can either be subject to the change or I can be part of the change. And I think your right hand man strategy is leaning into and being part of the change. And I think that that's a fantastic strategy.
yeah, well, I did it later in my career when I was a little more mature because I've had the same thing happen earlier in my career, and I fought that person. So, but I think I
Yep.
learned as I got a little older and became a little more experienced. So, what would you say is the top takeaway that you want readers to have as they go through this book and learn about these archetypes?
Yeah. What a great question. Maybe I'll begin this way, and bear with me. I think that the closest thing that human beings have to magic are hope, and confidence. And if you have those things, or you can build those things through some of the coping strategies in this book and other books, I think that you will have a fantastic career. Knowing your worth is also super important. No matter how many books like mine you read, they may just not work out. You may say, I tried everything, and this person is just not willing to listen, or none of these strategies are working. Knowing your worth, having confidence, and having hope, and not losing sight of that will help you say, you know what, it's time for me to go. I've always often believed. I had a chance to sit down with our CEO when I was at Microsoft, and he said, Eric, you know what? People don't quit teams. They don't quit companies. They quit managers.
Hmm.
And that really stuck with me, even especially as I was writing this book. And in some instances, you might have to say it's time to go. And knowing your worth is really important. Not running from something, but running to something is also equally important. If you run from something, you might run out of a house that's on fire into another house that's further along on fire, right? So those would be the big things that I would kind of make sure that people realize. And then, in terms of these archetypical behaviors, these behaviors flourish in silence. So if you don't cope, if you don't say anything, these behaviors will continue in perpetuity. And it may take dealing with fear of missing out. It may take you getting courage. It may take you, having the confidence to say something respectfully and proactively and in the spirit of partnership. Ultimately, I think you'll be in a better place if you do, because if you let these things fester, they will stick around and they will become entrenched.
Yeah, that is so true. And I have a good friend of mine who always says, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. So at some point you have to there might be a point where you say, I'm just being tolerated here and I know my worth. And
Yeah.
so maybe it's time to go someplace where I fit better, with my skills are more appreciated, and that I'm not fighting that battle all the time. So, but I think to your point, we should not let these behaviors go unaddressed, and just sort of operate, and us always be silent. So I think we're in a place now where really, I think companies have to fight hard to keep good talent. And so if you're not in a position where you feel like you're being fought for and protected, maybe it might be time to go find another opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, completely agree with that.
Yeah, I love it. So this is fantastic. It's been a fantastic discussion, Eric. How can our listeners find out more about you and this brand new book?
Yeah, so the book is available for pre-order now on Amazon. If you just put in the search, have you ever had a boss, that it'll pop up. You can learn more about me and connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look for my first name and my last name as the URL of LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram at author Eric Charran, and as long as TikTok's going to be around, I'm there too. Author Eric Charran.
Fantastic. We're going to go ahead and put links in the show notes for all of Eric's resources. And again, it's a brand new book. And maybe you have a dysfunctional boss. Maybe you have a dysfunctional environment that you're working. Maybe you've heard one or two of the archetypes we talked about, and you're like, you want to learn more. You want to learn more coping strategy. We didn't even cover. There's total of 9 archetypes. So if we didn't cover the one your boss has, it's going to be in the book. So I highly recommend you follow the link in the show notes. And the book is called "Have You Ever Had a Boss That?" And the subtitle is Succeeding in a Dysfunctional Workplace. And I highly recommend this book, brand new book, just coming out. And it's going to help you deal with those, interesting boss archetypes that you might experience in your career. So get this book. It'll make you be a better follower and a better leader. So go ahead and get that book. Eric, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for writing this book. And thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with our listeners.
John, it has been a great conversation. I was looking forward to this, and it was well worth it. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.